G'day hobby enthusiasts. Today is a fantastic day. We are absolutely beyond excited. Games Workshop has finally announced the release of the old world. It's close. It's very, very close. So we're going to take you back to the old world. But that's not the old world. That's Necromunda. That's from our last video. So guys, production, can you guys fix this? Like, now? It's better. That's better. So now we're back in the old world. It got me thinking. A lot of you guys are probably mouldy old hats like me. But there's going to be a lot of guys out there that are young in the hobby. They've come in this era of plastics. They haven't worked with all the mediums that us mouldy old hats have. So I thought, why don't we grab out those mediums? Why don't we grab out some models and let's get down to the table and let's go back and either refresh ourselves on how to work with those materials and get your models prepped properly, or if you haven't worked with some of these materials before, learn how to properly work with them. Learn how to get your models prepared for painting so that they look fantastic on the tabletop. So let's leave this beautiful castle behind us and head down to the paint table and we'll get started. Alright guys, so we're down at the hobby desk now. I want to go through some of the basic tools with you. So we'll start off with this, probably one of the most important things for getting models off the sprues, especially in terms of plastic and finecast. It's just a pair of side cutters. So Games Workshop do it, Army Painter do it, a lot of other hobby companies do it for model airplanes, etc, etc. These are actually just electrical side cutters that I managed to nab online. They're really good because they've got a good flat spot there to cut close to the model, and that's something you want. You don't want something that's got that cove on the inside. You want it to be nice and flat. They've got a good narrowness to the point, and they're not overly fat when you look at them side on either. So they're really good. They're really handy. I find these ones are really beautiful and smooth. Move on to the next one. The humble hobby knife. I managed to grab a kit. It's got lots of multiple different blades, different shapes, all that sort of stuff. So I've got plenty of good, really nice sharp ones there, but this is a bit more of a dull one. I find it's really good for cleaning the bruises off the models after you cut them all away from the sprue. Just helps do half of the work for you before you actually start trying to clean it up. Next thing, now this isn't my cup of tea. I know a lot of other people are starting to swear by these, is a mold line remover. Very simple tool. It's basically just a piece of metal that's cut into that sort of shape, and you just rub it along the model and it's supposed to remove the mold line. I've got another way that I prefer to do it, but this still has its uses. It's fantastic on terrain. It's good on vehicles and large kits and stuff like that. So it is still part of my toolkit, but it's not my go-to, because anything this can do, the humble hobby knife with a bit of a dull blade can do it as well. Finally, something that a lot of hobby companies do sell is these small files. Now you'll find different ones. You'll find ones that are a bit more sandpapery. I got these from my local automotive shop. It cost me $5 for the pack of 10. As you can see, you get all different pictures and shapes, and it's fantastic. You can get into most nooks and crannies with them. They're not perfect, but they do a damn good job. At the end of the day, sort of make a personal decision between this or fine sanding sticks and sandpapers, but I just find these are a bit easier to use, and having a packet that keeps them all together, and you can clean them out with a wire brush. You know, sanding sticks, after a while you got to turf them and get a new one, you know, for a $5 investment. You'll get hundreds, thousands of models out of these, and it's such a small investment that just takes your models to that finished level. So what we'll do, we'll go through and we'll have a look at some different products that are used to make miniatures. Obviously we'll start off with plastic. It's something everyone knows. It's something that most of the Games Workshop range has gone now. The details are good. It's definitely easy to work with. You've got your suitable glues. So in instance for plastic, you buy a plastic glue and use plastic glue. There are people out there that like super glue. That's fine, but at the end of the day, this stuff actually chemically bonds and chemically welds the plastic together for a better join than super glue. When it comes to repairs, it tends to sort of hide stuff a little bit easier too if you do get a broken model, especially with some of these fine details like on the claws and that sort of stuff. So use the right thing for the right product. If you're going to use plastic models, use plastic glue. Next, we have our metal models. So this here, it's a direct model. It's a missionary with chainsword, and as you can see, you got a mixture of a plastic base and a few pieces of metal in there. We'll open them up later on and have a bit better look at what it looks like on the inside of the package and how we put it together. But it's a little bit different to work with metal than it is with plastic. So there are a few things to look out for, and there are a few things you've got to really keep your eyes open for when you're working with it. Finally, finecast or resin. So this here is obviously Mr. Yarrick, a well-known and loved character from the Imperial Guard, but you can see he's not metal, he's not plastic, he's resin. Very lightweight, very brittle, and easy to break, and it's very important to treat resin with respect and try and not hack at it and go too hard with it. So we'll go through some of the extra stuff when we get to that model a bit later on. Alright guys, so we've made some room. We'll bring out our plastic sprue and our base, and we'll start working on this one. So pick your model. So for example, I know these 4 pieces here make a model. So what I'll do, I'll come in from behind with the clippers, try and use the point of the clippers so you're not forcing them all the way through like that. You just want to get the point to the edge, just past the edge of that sprue gate. Give them a little bit of a cut. Move to the next one, same thing. So you're always trying to use this end bit of your blade to cut it, to get a nice clean smooth cut without damaging your model, and using the finest part of your cut as possible. So we'll go around, we'll get all these pieces cut out, and we'll come back once they're done. So we've got our 4 pieces out now, and what I like to do, I like to now bring my trusty hobby knife over and start finding those connection points and just taking the high bits off them without gouging into the model, without trying to cut too much of that detail away. So just gently start working down it. You can scrape across it like that with the end of the blade, but the best bet is to just take that high spot off first, and then you can scrape across it and remove the rest like that. So once you've done that, you can throw that model down and move to your next piece. Yet again, same thing. Just look for the high spot. For example, there's that one big connection right there. Come in with your blade, take the high spot off it, give it a little scrape down, move on. We'll go through and complete the rest of these pieces, and we'll come back to you in a minute. So now we've got that first bit of the basic cleanup done, we'll move on to the next bit, which is to remove the mold lines. There's 2 ways to do this. You can use file or some narrow small sandpaper, sanding sticks, stuff like that, or you can use a mold line remover. I'm going to show you now why I actually don't like the mold line remover for doing small infantry miniatures and that sort of stuff. I don't mind it, like I said before. Vehicles, terrain, that sort of stuff, big bulky stuff, this is fantastic. It does the job so quickly, and it cuts down the amount of time you use this. But on a miniature, this is much better, and this is why I say you should have a set of needle files in your toolbox for doing your hobby. So what we'll do, we'll pick up this bit here. It's got a nice straight bit there. It's nice and easy to use and show how to do this. So we know the mold lines along here, along the top. So what we do, we just grab it, put it on a 45-ish degree angle, scrape along the top of the model there, give it a couple of quick scrapes, you're done. It's cleaned up, mold lines removed. But just here, we've got all these little lumps and bumps. As you can see, the mold line remover doesn't even fit properly between there, so you can't scrape around it. It's kind of awkward and cumbersome to get in there. You've got all these lumps and bumps. Just here we've got a fairly tight spot where I can't do anything in there. I can only scrape to about here. I can't get in here. And this is where the needle file becomes far superior. So we'll put that one down and we'll move over to this. And what I can do with this is just use the point to just gently get into all those nooks and crannies. It only needs a little file. This one's pretty good. Some models, they have some horrible mold lines on them and they need a little bit more. But this one's good. You can see there's a burr there, so I'll just wrap it around and get all that bruising that's on the model from the sprue gate. Quickly run along the mold line. I'll start in here. There's a nice fine bit in there. Bring it out here. Use the tip of it and just slowly and gently, if I need to, I'll put another finger on it just to rest it and support it from underneath, and that'll help keep control of it really well. I'll come around, I'll do it all, even the peg that goes in the base. I know you don't see that bit, but it just makes the peg fit so much easier into the base, so it slides in and slides out. You're not trying to jam it in, it's getting stuck and all that sort of stuff. Come along, do the underside. If you're very light like that, one quick pass and it's done. That's it, that bit's done. Give it a quick wipe down for any loose stuff. That part's ready to go together. Put it down, grab your next bit, go through, keep going. We'll get these other 3 bits done. We'll come back to you and continue the process. With that now done, we're ready to actually assemble our miniature. So although this is a push fit model, I actually like using this stuff, plastic glue. It just keeps it together. It's not going to fall apart. It's not going to, you know, separate mid-game or something like that while you're picking it up. So this one, it's got a great little application rod and that sort of stuff. Multiple people do it. You've got your Revels, you've got your Citadels, you've got Tamiya's, all that sort of stuff. At the end of the day, this with the needle applicator is a nice, easy way to put it on, much better than brushing it on and that sort of stuff. So I'd highly recommend picking up one of these. It is refillable. I've actually refilled it. I'm nearly halfway through the second amount of glue in this bottle, so they do last. The outlay's worth it. So we'll grab our model. We know this bit's going to go in there, so what I like to do, put a bit of glue on the pegs that are going to go into each other. And then I like to, with my excess, just wipe it around the area where the plastic will meet the rest of the model. Put our glue down, chuck our lid on it so that it doesn't keep spewing out everywhere. Get them into position, put it together, give it a good hard push so the glue takes, and just hold it for 5 seconds or so. That way it gives time for that initial bond, that initial weld from that plastic glue to go off. That's it. So you got your 2 bits done there. We'll chuck our support arm in first before our gun arm. So again, same thing, just go in there, hit that little bit there, and I'll chuck a little bit up under that carapace there, just so that it melds in nicely to the body. Now these are great because they fit in, they only go one way, so you can't really stuff it up. If you've got a multi-part posable kit, you might have to try and be super quick with it so that you could try and get the other arm going as quick as possible before it tacks off. You got about 20-30 seconds of posability with this stuff before it starts to set and become a bit gummy. So we'll chuck that one in there, line up our hand, push it together and give it a quick hold so that hand doesn't separate back out. And as you can see, that model's now done. Whack a bit around your base there. I'm going to hold off here because I'm actually going to do a bit of a unique base. We'll come back and we'll have a look at that base later on as to how we're going to do it for this Tyrannid, but just chuck him in there. You've got your plastic model now done. So I'll put him up there and we'll give this area a bit of a clean up and wipe down, and we'll move on to the next metal model. So metal, it's a bit different working with metal than it is with plastic. It's not quite as easy, it's not quite as flexible and fun, and it's definitely something that I wouldn't even bother trying to use this on. I don't think you would get any benefits using a mold line remover on metal. So we'll empty this guy out of his pack. So as you can see, we've got 3 bits and our base. Now firstly, you'll know it doesn't come on a sprue, so it comes completely independent. As you can see on this chainsawed arm here, we've got the chainsaw up here coming down to the hand, and where my fingers are there, we've got a nice triangle, and that's actually part of the mold pouring process. So you know, it may have been sitting something like that in the mold or like that, and they've actually written tab on it. So they've poured in up here, it's come through, there's a little tab there. The other thing that we've got on these models, I'll grab a bit of a pointer. I've got a lot of these little dags. As you can see, I'm sort of bending them around. These are not part of the model at all. These are left from the mold. So if I turn him that way, you could see there's sort of 3 prongs standing out here. They've got to go, and you'll find them absolutely hidden everywhere on these metal models. It's not a problem, they're easy to get rid of. A lot of them you could just wiggle it back and forward, you'll have a little bit there, give it a flick, you've basically got it all off. Or alternatively, we can grab our side cutters, get right to the base of it, give it a bit of a twist and a light pull, and most of it breaks off and doesn't sort of need any more cleanup. You don't really need to run a file over it. It's beneficial if you do, but you don't have to. You could sort of just leave it if you clean it up properly like that. We've got them here. So as you can see, they're just everywhere on this model. And that's one of the things about working with metal. It's beautiful, it's definitely weighty, but it's got a lot more cleanup than it does plastic, and I mean a lot more. I don't know how you would go with a sanding file or a sanding pad, sanding stick, that sort of stuff. I think it'd be a bit pointless to bother with that sort of stuff. I think the best thing is just to stick with these needle files. You can use them across all mediums. They're quick and easy to use. Like I said, they're inexpensive. I got mine from auto shops, but hardware shops can often sell them too. They're just beautiful. So down here we've got a mold line. You sort of catch it when you turn the model onto the front here. So what we want to do, the same thing as plastic, is go along it and start filing it down. As you see, it starts creating this sort of flatter pat. So you need to get into those recesses and those details and move the file with them. You can't, it's not like a plastic model where you could just you give it a light file and it's done. You need to work with the details that are in the model here and blend that mold line out. It does take a little bit longer than plastic. It's not quite as easy to work with, but the result is worth it. As you can see, by the time this is done, you've got no mold line. It hasn't taken that much longer, but it's definitely not as easy. You definitely need that little bit more pressure. The other benefit is, as you go around, you can look for more of those tags. So I've just found another one there on the side of his holstered pistol. There's another one there on the back of his wrist. And that's what I mean, these little tags are bloody everywhere. I love working with metal models, don't get me wrong. But those tags, that's why it's so important not to just pull it out the packet and go whack, he's done. That is why it's so important to clean this model up. So what I'll do, I'll go through and get him done. We've got this one with a tag on it. We've got this one with a tag on it. So what do we do there? The same as if you're cutting it off a sprue. Come in, cut as close as you can to the model. Use as little of the blades of your cutters as possible. Give it a cut. Now, we can't really run your knife over that safely. I'm putting a bit of pressure on that. The only thing you can do with this metal stuff is come in with your file and give it a really good hard file. You'll feel it wear away very quickly, so don't go too ballistic, but you do have to wear down at it with your file. It's the only way to get rid of it off metal models. But as you can see, doesn't take very long at all, and it's done. So I'll go through, I'll get this model done, and once it's all filed up, we can already start looking at assembling this. So we'll be back in a minute. So as you can see, we've now gone through and filed all that up, done the best we can. Smaller areas like this, we haven't been able to get in there properly with a file. So what we'll do, just take your blade, just try and roll and rub across it a little bit. Just a little bit of pressure, just the tip of your blade. You don't have to go all the way in. Just try and soften it down as much as you can. Hit different angles. Same in there. There's one big thing about metal models, which is before you even get your glue out, dry fit. Dry fit, dry fit, dry fit. The guide on this wrist here, where my thumbnail is so small and shallow, yet the receival point for it in there is a lot deeper. So I'll give him a dry fit, and I can already see, even rotating it round, it's not going to seat perfectly. It's going to be sitting off, it's wobbling around a bit. That's not a good contact for metal to metal. So there's obviously, just in here, a little build-up of metal that we haven't been able to remove. We might have missed it when we were filing, it might have been in the mould, it could be around this side where we haven't even filed. So we'll just use a fair bit of pressure and just push around that connection post and try and move it, shift it. There was something there, I could feel that when I pushed it. There's something caught there, but we've got it now, it's nice and smooth. We'll now try and dry fit it again, and that is a much better fit. We can glue that and that'll hold. So what we've got to do, and this is important here, you can't use plastic glue on metal models or resin. We've got to use super glue now. I've just got this cheap stuff, you know, all your different brands. There's Gorilla, or there's Tarzan Grip, whatever. Just put a little dollop of it on there. Sometimes with this stuff, less is best. Put it in there, hold your model for a few seconds just to let that glue activate. There you go, that's about 5 seconds. Let go. That's already glued. That's done. So what we'll do the same thing for the backpack. We'll dry fit it We know that fits nicely, snugly. It's got a good connection in there, so we'll glue around that post and we'll just push them together. Hold them for about 5 seconds and you're done. Obviously that was a larger area with a bigger bit of metal, so there's a bit more glue there. It'll take a little bit longer to dry. Key is with this stuff, less is more. So the less you put on, the quicker it'll dry, the more air can get to it and dry it out. Bigger bits like that takes a little bit longer. So he's done. These metal models all come with a tab across the bottom of the base, just here. And that's for slotting into your old slotter bases. This one's pretty good. Got a little bit of a wobble. If you have any issues with it, just take your model, get your side cutters, and just fold along it a little bit. Give it a little push out in the middle. I've got one finger where one foot is. I've got the side cutters on the other. I'm pulling my hand towards me. I'm pushing towards me with my other one. I've just put a little wave in that. I'll be able to now put that in, and as you can see there's no more wobble, it's now nice and snug. So you just run some super glue across the front and back of that tab, slot him in, hold him for your 5 seconds, and he's done. With this one though, I'm going to create a bit of a bespoke base so that it fits in with the rest of my army. And what I've done, I've cut the tabs off. Here's one that I'm part way through painting. I've cut the tabs off. I've created that beautiful bespoke base, and I've actually put a couple of pins in the bottom. I've drilled into that base, and he just slots in there. So at the moment while I'm painting him, I can pull him out. Once he's done, I'll just glue him in there and leave him. So pinning is putting the application of 2 little metal rods, in this case paper clips, in. Plastic models takes you a few seconds a model, drilling out barrels, stuff like that. It's nice and easy. Going into metal, I think it took me about 2 minutes per pin on this model, maybe longer. A lot of rubbing on the hand. So that just shows you how hard metal is compared to the plastic. It takes a lot longer to clean up. It takes a lot longer to pin it, to drill barrels, etc., etc., than plastic. But at the end of the day, it is something that looks nice. And as you can see, I'm just putting all that into a pile. That's all just come off one model. Plastic, we had nothing to clean up. That is all our leftovers, our cleanup from the metal model. So it's definitely something you really do need to focus on and keep an eye on when you're cleaning them up. It is all these little dags and extra bits that are hanging off the side. We'll clean the table up now and we'll move on to our third and final model, which will be our resin. So here we are, we've got our resin model here. So in this case it's a finecast model. It also can come as Forge World resin. Very similar materials. At the end of the day they're both resin, so it's essentially the same sort of methods to go over it. So we'll just cut him out here, cut the back off this and get him out, and I'll start talking you through it. We've got our base, put our packet aside. Right, so in the case of finecast, it's very much like a plastic sprue. Both of them come gated onto the sprue. Obviously this one has a lot more connection points than your plastic ones, so there's a lot more to clean up on this one. These ones tend to be a lot more refined and easier to work with. As I've already said, they're injection molded. They're they're nearly flawless, except for your basic mold line. This, you've got gates absolutely everywhere. Resin's also very, very brittle. It's not great to work with. It's not a great material. Now, I know they've tried to remove the finecast range, but with the old world coming back, they've already said yes, they're going to be bringing metal models back, but there were some models that were made in finecast and never made it to a metal mold, and we're yet to find out whether they're going to keep them as finecast or revert them to metal. So what we'll do, we'll grab our clippers and we'll start cutting this one out. So we've got to find our model. The gates, some of them are very thick and almost look like the model. Some of them are, in this case, very thin. But then they become very wide and again can look like part of the model. So just carefully determine what is and isn't part of the model. As you can see, this is very, very soft stuff. Sometimes you have to just keep flipping it to find the best access with your clippers. It is super soft. I have next to no pressure on this. I actually have less pressure cutting this than plastic. So we'll move on and we'll do the next one. Just being very careful not to cut any of the details of the miniature on it. As you can see, it's leaving a lot of big burrs along there. We don't want to actually cut perfectly up against the model here because it is so brittle. It will break your model before it will break the sprue. It's just something that's known for it. So we'll go through and we'll distinguish, like I said, what's part of the model and what's not, and cut all that gating away. We'll free the model from the sprue and then we'll come back. So we've cut it all away. We're going to give it a clean up just like we are plastic. We're just going to have to be very, very careful. Like I said, doing this sort of stuff, you're better off using sort of an older, dull hobby knife. Now, there was a big gate almost all the way along his hat there, which I've had to cut away. Now this is something that's identical for both Forge World and Finecast, is the locations of big fat gates like that. They're difficult to work with, but you just have to slowly work at it, and slowly, it's almost sculpting the model back from the gates. And just take your time with this. Just make sure you get it right, and be aware that it is soft. It is something that can break quite easily, or you can cut too far in. It's not as forgiving as plastic or metal. And what we'll do, we'll get all these sprue connection points cleaned up, and we will come back to you when we're ready to remove the mold lines. Alright, so we've got all those sprue gate connections or bruises now cut off from this model. It is super, super soft. I can't emphasize that enough. There's a couple of times I almost cut further into the model than I intended to. I've actually just found another sprue gate here. So, like the metal, you need to have some really good eyes and take your time with this and just check over it multiple times. So, much like plastic, it's going to file up super easy. Matter of fact, it's actually going to file too easy. It's also not great for you to breathe this stuff in, so keep your sanding, where possible, minimal on this. Alternatively, you can wear a mask. Do it outdoors and wear a mask. But just be mindful that, especially in large quantities or large volumes, this stuff is toxic. It's not great to breathe in. Something small like this, I'm not too phased. It's only a single model, it's only a small one. The mold lines are pretty good. I'm just giving it a real quick light rub over just to make sure that they're all gone. But something bigger, say a large miniature from Forge World or something, I'd be inclined to take that one outside and put a mask on and give it a damn good clean up from there. The other thing with resin, for some reason, it's to do with the process of casting, but for some reason it tends to form air bubbles, and they can be quite prolific. So this one, there's actually an air bubble just in there where the tip of my file is. Don't fear, it's easy to fix up. It can be just part of the production process. Admittedly, they have gotten better at picking that up and removing those models from the run and that sort of stuff, or they've changed their process of casting resin miniatures, and it's now occurring a lot less. What we'll do, we'll get this one together and we'll mix up just a tiny little bit of green stuff, and we'll put it in there to fix that one up, and that way it looks immaculate again. This is the second finecast Yarrick that I got. I actually ordered them at the same time. Funnily enough, this one has a little issue there, and my previous one had a little issue on that piston there where the air bubble formed right on the end and it was a bit short. So with resin, keep your eye out for that as you're going and cleaning up your model. It's like I said, it's a real quick and easy fix, but it's just an additional thing that you have to do to prepare these models for painting. So we'll go through, we'll file this one up, we'll file up the other parts, we'll come back to glue it together. Righto, so we've got that model now cleaned up and filed and all the mold lines removed. We'll grab our super glue again and we'll just start assembling, same as we would with anything else. Like I said with the metal, less is best with this stuff. It'll create a better bond and glue a lot faster, meaning less holding. So we'll get that one up in there, try and locate the pin, hold it for 5 seconds, done. Same on the claw here, just put a little bit. If you get too much, give it a wipe off, give it a good spread out, get the claw in place and just hold it for 5 seconds, just so that bond can happen between the parts and the super glue. Obviously, again, glue along the tab of the base, slot him in, and he is done. Again, I'm going to make a bespoke base for this one, so I'll be cutting that tab off at a later stage. Just finally, before we put this one away, we've got this stuff. So it's called green stuff. Now I only need a tiny bit, but you get sort of equal parts of this blue and yellow. Cut a strip off the end, whatever it is. So you want some of the blue, some of the yellow. Get them and mix them together until they turn green. It's going to be a bit more difficult for me here because I am only using a small amount for a tiny bit, but as you can see, it's starting to, that yellow sort of disappearing into that blue already, and it's starting to change to that greenish tinge. Once you got it nice and green and smooth, we could chuck it in where we need to chuck it. So in this case, it's on that shoulder pad where that air bubble was. You can use it to fill in larger gaps on models if you've got bits that don't just fit together well, or you end up with a big gap between a couple of panels. Once you're done, just try and roll it as best you can into a sausage. Obviously, easier the bigger it is. Here, I've got my hobby knife. I have got a sculpting tool here, which is actually the proper way to do it. But for the size of the piece, I actually want a very fine tip. So I will use the hobby knife because it's got a finer tip. Just position your model where you can work on it, because you will need 2 hands with this stuff. Grab a bit of your green stuff, smush it in there, pull the rest away. So I've got a nice little dollop there on his shoulder pad, as you can see. I'm just going to sort of tease it, use a little bit of water. I've got my paint pot sitting here just off the screen. I'll dampen down that blade so it's easier to work with. And I'll just mold that around and just try and push it in and fit around all the details that are there. So that's looking pretty good. By the time you get a coat of paint on that, you won't notice it. And that's it. That's our resin model now complete. So now that that's done, we'll go back into Fantasyland and we'll do a bit of a wrap up. Well, there you have it. Hopefully, if you're a moldy old hat like me, it reminded you and refreshed you on how to work with some of these mediums, especially the metal and the resin. I mean, resin's becoming a lot more popular now. Forge World stuff, they're doing a lot of, you know, single miniatures for the specialist games, and Horus Heresy, Necromunda, Blood Bowl, all that sort of stuff. We're starting to see a lot more resin pop up in that niche, and the old world is essentially going to be a specialist game. So we're going to see a lot of the new sculpts and that come out in resin. Metal, it's tried, it's true, it's loved, it's been there from the start, and it's only disappeared in the last 10 to 15 years from the range. So it's definitely something that everyone needs a bit of a refresher on, a bit of a reminder on how to work with it and what it's like to work with, especially with all those extra little bits of metal coming off the sides from the moulding process. So hopefully you have reminded yourself something or learnt something new if you're maybe a new head that has only worked in this era of plastic. Just make sure before we leave, we'll hit that like, we'll hit that subscribe button down the bottom. That way you get all our new videos pop up in your feed. Hit the bell, you'll be notified straight away when a new video pops up from us. The other thing is, make sure you share it to these guys that haven't worked with these mediums before. It's going to be a bit of a Hobby Basics 101 this series, so they're the ones that are going to benefit the most. You know, maybe they don't live near a games workshop, or they don't have the support of someone that's been in the hobby for a while. So this series is more intended for them. So make sure you share it to your mates that are just getting involved here. They're the ones that are going to benefit the most. Thanks for that, guys. I'll leave it there and we'll catch you on the next one.